The Tien Wu group is known as the biggest martial arts association in the world, and it is seen as a symbol of pride in the Martian world, attracting the attention of millions of viewers. Even though it looks bright and impressive from the outside, there are many different types of unusual martial arts practiced inside, along with secrets that are even more strange and hard to understand. Still, no matter how mysterious or complex this association may seem, for an average person it is simply a place where they can go to earn a living. In this time, when it is becoming harder and harder for people to find stable jobs, a large boxing gym like this is often described as one of the best places to get work, since a person's past or background does not matter, and only their skills and abilities are important. Inside the Tien Wu gym, even if a person is unable to succeed as a professional boxer, it is not considered a failure, because they can still take on the role of a sparring partner and help train others. Meanwhile, inside the gym, two boxers are practicing by sparring with each other, and the one who has short hair keeps attacking his opponent by using many kinds of moves. The guy is genuinely impressed by his sparring partner, feeling that this opponent is really pushing him to give everything he has in the ring. Everyone watching the match can clearly see that the fight is really intense and exciting, and the crowd starts cheering loudly for one of the boys named Chen as they count down the final 20 seconds of the round. One spectator in the audience says that it is completely typical of Brother Chen to perform so well, adding that someone like himself would have already been knocked flat on the ground like a helpless cockroach long before this point. Upon hearing that, another person in the crowd shoots back that if Brother Chen had been anything like that guy, he never would have earned the title of Golden Spar, and goes on to say that Brother Chen clearly has all the skills and qualities needed to become a grade C sparring partner. The sparring match keeps going with the opponent throwing everything he has at Brother Chen in one final push, but before anything can be decided, the ring bell goes off and brings the round to an end. After that, Chen calmly points out to his sparring partner that he noticeably rushed through his last few punches and explains that doing so causes his follow-up strikes to lose a good amount of their power. The sparring partner is caught off guard by this observation, yet somewhere deep inside he already understands and accepts that this level of honest and detailed feedback is exactly what someone should expect from a person who has earned the title of the Golden Sparring Partner. Later, while sitting in the changing room, Chen thinks to himself that boxing cannot exist without taking some hits, so he cannot really blame the other person, and instead he believes that he should blame himself for being careless during the match. While all of this is going on, the person helping by massaging his shoulders asks him if he knows where the band-aids are kept. Chen tells him to check cupboard number 12, since he remembers that a guy named Xiaobo Zhang, who got really badly beaten up the month before, had left some band-aids there. Later that night, Chen picks up his medicine along with some groceries and then heads back home, where his sister immediately jumps on him and wraps herself around him in a tight hug like a little monkey. His sister then gets super excited and starts firing off a bunch of different questions at him one after another, even throwing in a complaint that she feels really bored whenever she is stuck at home alone with no one around to play with. Chen does not really say much back to her though, and instead quietly makes his way to his room where he soon drifts off to sleep. After that, the story shifts back into a flashback from Chen's past, showing how he had been abandoned as a newborn by his own biological parents and left all alone out on the streets. At that very moment, a girl with pink hair happens to be walking by when she suddenly notices the baby just lying there, and she finds herself wondering how anyone could possibly be so heartless as to leave a tiny infant in such a terrible condition. Feeling genuinely sorry for him, the girl makes up her mind to pick him up and bring him along with her as she makes her way back home. As she walks through the area, a group of women spot her and immediately start whispering and talking about her behind her back, calling her the shameless girl from the Gu family and spreading rumors that she is an unmarried single mother who is probably out somewhere chasing after men, as far as any of them can tell. They also go on to claim that her own father has already kicked her out and thrown her onto the streets, and that not a single one of them has any idea where she has been living or how she has even been managing to get by, and they keep up their judgmental chatter the whole time she walks past them with the baby held carefully in her arms. Chen's new mother turns to him and tells him that he is so naturally good at studying that he is definitely going to grow up to be successful and earn the respect of everyone around him. She then smacks the girl on the head and tells her that she really needs to take a page out of her brother's book and learn something from him. Back in the present, Chen wakes up from a dream and his sister greets him right away, letting him know that she is cooking something for him and that he should just wait a little longer since the rice is almost done. After that, Chen tastes her cooking while she desperately stands nearby waiting for him to finish so she can hear whether it tastes good or not. Chen then finds himself thinking that he is not really sure why, but sometimes there is a voice in his head that tells him the only reason he ever got such good grades was because he had her help along the way. He also thinks about how back then, in order to keep his mom from worrying, He had hidden something away from her, and that secret stays buried even to this very day. The voice in his head had told him that maybe he really could make it into a good university someday and help lighten the burden that his mother carried. However, for the time being, the thing that matters most to him right now is finding a cure for his sisterling. Later, Tien arrives at the gym where a guy immediately warns him to watch himself since someone has been giving him dirty looks and his title as the Golden Spar is really starting to cause some trouble for him. Right at that moment, the old geezer walks up to Tien and tells him straight up that he is the backbone of their entire group. He also explains that there is a boxer currently in the sparring ring who has been scaring everyone off and nobody wants to risk getting hurt, but now he needs Tien to step up and get in there. Tien agrees to take the fight after the coach promises him that he will receive some extra bonuses for it, and the coach also makes it clear that the rules of engagement have to be strictly followed, meaning absolutely no strikes to the lower half of the body. The match gets started with the opponent launching a really powerful punch straight at Tien that genuinely catches him off guard and surprises him. The opponent then throws a kick at Tien's chest and with that, he jumps to the other side. Seeing that, the coach starts laughing as he wants to see how a D-grade boxer is going to survive against a C-grade one as there is a massive difference in strength. After that, the opponent keeps throwing a series of attacks at Tien, who starts to realize that he is in serious trouble if this continues, because his opponent is clearly very strong and aggressive. Someone from the crowd watches closely and thinks to himself that if the opponent lands even one more solid punch, then Tien might die right there on the spot. Even so, the opponent keeps attacking without stopping, while Tien barely manages to dodge each strike, thinking to himself that with the skills he has learned over time, he should somehow be able to survive this situation. Meanwhile, the opponent remembers a past match where he suffered a terrible loss, and this memory makes him even more furious, as he thinks that losing in the ring was already humiliating enough, and now he cannot even defeat a low-level sparring partner. Filled with anger, he throws a powerful punch straight at Tien's chest and follows it up with a strong kick that sends Tien crashing into the corner of the ring. Tien begins coughing up blood and points out that the move was against the rules, but the opponent, who is already blinded by rage, charges forward with another dangerous punch, which Tien barely manages to dodge at the last possible moment. Tien starts to question whether this has turned into a mixed fighting match, and he thinks that if the opponent manages to land even a single punch on him in his current condition, then he will be completely finished. Even so, the opponent throws yet another punch toward him, and Tien barely manages to avoid it by using his guard as a shield. When Tien opens his eyes again, he sees the opponent rushing at him with another attack, which makes him wonder if this might truly be the end for him. At that moment, he understands that not only is his life in great danger, but also that his forehead could be pierced in less than half a second. Even then, Tien somehow manages to hold back his own punch halfway and forces himself to think quickly, realizing that if he does not take action immediately, he could lose his life right there. Right then, he notices a strange bright light shining from the left side of his opponent's chest, and without hesitating at all, he decides to strike that exact spot with all the strength he can gather. The moment he does that, everyone watching is left completely shocked, as they cannot believe that Tien was able to knock his opponent out in what felt like the blink of an eye. At that exact moment, the coach rushes angrily toward the ring and demands an explanation, questioning how Tien could dare to hit a boxer in such a manner, saying that it clearly breaks the rules and warning him that his sparring license will be taken away because of it. Hearing this, Tien's friend immediately becomes angry and argues back at the coach, questioning if he is blind and asking how he could ignore all the unfair and dirty moves that the other opponent had been using the entire time. Meanwhile, Tien slowly comes back to his senses and starts wondering whether he has actually killed the guy. He also finds himself thinking about what kind of condition his opponent, Mad Dog, is even in right now. Tien's friend then quietly signals to another fighter nearby, telling him to go inform the higher-ups of the gym about what just happened right away. The guy quickly runs over and rings the bell, thinking to himself that a sparring partner taking out a boxer is a massive deal and that he seriously needs to do something to save Tien. On the other side of things, Mad Dog's friend is furious at Tien for beating up his buddy and looks like he is ready to do something about it. However, before he can make any kind of move, Tien's friend steps right in front of him and makes it crystal clear that if he wants to get to Tien, he is going to have to go through him first. At that same moment, a guy and a blue-haired girl walk through the doors and into the gym. Seeing the situation, the coach quickly rushes over to the guy and addresses him by the name Master Paulo, telling him that Tien had fought back and struck a boxer. He also adds on that as a sparring partner Tien absolutely has to be severely punished for attacking and taking down a boxer like that. However, Tien speaks up and defends himself by explaining that Mad Dog had been hiding a weapon on him and was actually trying to kill him. Tien's friend backs him up right away and points out that they should take a good look at the wounds on Tien's body, which do not even look anything like normal boxing injuries at all. He also brings up the fact that this is not even the first time that Mad Dog has pulled off something shady like this. Master Paulo then takes a moment to look closely at the wounds before turning to the girl standing beside him and telling her to go check through the security footage in the camera room to figure out exactly what went down. The girl then walks over to Mad Dog's body and begins carefully examining him. It is at this point that Chen realizes that she is actually the gym's well-known and beautiful lady doctor, Yushin. After finishing her examination of the body, she turns to the others and tells them to come get him immediately because his throat has been pierced by a blade and that if they do not do something about it right now, he is most likely going to bleed out very soon. Later over in the security room, Yushin lays out the situation clearly and explains that the truth of the matter is pretty straightforward, since the boxer had broken the rules by fighting with an illegal weapon and the sparring partner had struck the boxer's throat purely in self-defense. On top of that, she also points out that there is a very high chance that the boxer might not even make it out alive. Chen's friend then jumps in right away and says that it has to be Ting Wang behind all of this, insisting that he was the one who started the whole thing and that he would bet anything that Ting Wei was also the one responsible for doping Mad Dog up before the fight. Yushin then backs that up by noting that during the fight, Mad Dog had been displaying an unnatural and alarming amount of bloodlust that was way beyond what would normally be expected. She also goes on to say that if Mad Dog had not been doped up in the first place, the person lying there out cold right now would most likely have been Chen instead. Taking all of this in, Master Paulo slowly turns to face Ting Wang and tells him flat out that putting him in charge of the sparring group had been a serious mistake from the very start. Yushin then steps in once more and points out clearly that Mad Dog was the one who broke the rules first, and that it is only natural and completely justified for Chen to have fought back in self-defense. She also brings up the fact that according to the gym's own rules, anything can happen once someone steps into the ring, and that if a person has the resolve to get in there, they should also be fully prepared and willing to put their life on the line. Master Paulo then gives the order to have Ting Wei removed from the gym entirely and turns to Chen and tells him that starting from today he will be taking Mad Dog's place in the fights. Right at that moment, Mad Dog's friend jumps in and points out that Mad Dog had already signed a contract with the gym for a total of 15 fights, meaning that every single one of those fights still has to be carried out. Chen's friend then speaks up and says that he wants in on the fights as well, so Master Paulo decides that he can take on 5 of the matches while Chen is allowed to handle the remaining 10. Once they get outside, Chen's friend tells him not to worry about him at all since he could easily take on another 10 matches if he really wanted to. He also brings up the fact that he simply cannot let anything bad happen to Chen, because if something does go wrong, there would be nobody left to look after his little sister. Chen then makes his way over to Yushin's medical room where he gets his wounds properly treated and taken care of. Once he is settled in, Yushin turns to him and asks him why she went out of her way to help him the way she did today. She tells him to just think of it as simple kindness, explaining that she simply could not stand watching his foolishness drag all the people around him into his mess, and so she had felt the need to step in and do something about it. She then goes on to explain that Mad Dog had clearly been trying to kill him the entire time, which means that what he did can very easily be classified as self-defense, and that according to the actual rules of Tien Wu Gym, all he really needs to do is pay a fine and the whole matter should be completely settled after that. However, she also points out that none of this would have even been a problem in the first place if everyone had just followed the proper legal procedure from the start, but instead they all just let their emotions get the better of them. She then looks at him and asks whether he genuinely thinks he has what it takes to make it through 10 fights. Hearing that, Chen is completely caught off guard and suddenly realizes that his head had been such a total mess after the fight that he had not even stopped to think about that at all. Chen then asks her whether she is saying that he put Kuriko in danger by doing all of this, but then brings up the fact that Paulo had his eye on Kuriko for the longest time already. Chen then realizes to himself that Kuriko had been his real target all along and that he is simply using him as a way to get closer to Kuriko. Yushin then speaks up and says that regardless of everything, Mad Dog is still one of Paulo's men and that it is absolutely certain that Paulo is going to make him pay for what he did. She also warns Chen that if he does not improve drastically over the next couple of days, he is not going to last any more than 3 fights at best. Once she is finished talking, Chen leaves the room, but as he opens up his hand, he discovers a small chit that she had quietly slipped to him and written on it is a message telling him to meet her on the 18th floor of Blue Moon Tower. He then walks out of the gym, thinking to himself that the first thing he needs to do before anything else is go buy his sister her medication. Just then, Chen's attention is suddenly grabbed by some loud noises coming from a nearby alley, and as he looks over, he finds that a girl is being cornered by a group of thugs. One of the bullies pulls out a knife and gets right in her face, telling her that she needs to stop fighting back or else they are going to post her pictures all over the internet for everyone to see. After that, Tien arrives at the alley to help out the young lady, but the thug tells him to stay out of this. The other thug continues to girl by taking off her clothes, but Tien quickly jumps at him and kicks him straight in the chest. Seeing that, the yellow-haired thug charges at him with a knife as he wants to kill him, but Tien dodges him and smashes him onto the ground. The thug then starts cursing at Tien, saying he must have broken some of his ribs, which is actually assault, so he has to pay for that. However, Tien completely ignores him and walks straight over to the girl instead, telling her that she should really try to stick to the main streets from now on since that particular alley is not a very safe place for her to be walking through. He then hands her jacket back to her, and once she puts it on, she moves in surprisingly close to him and tells him how grateful she is for stepping in and helping her out like that. Tien then notices that she is creeping way too close to him for absolutely no good reason at all, and right away something in the back of his mind is telling him that something dangerous is about to go down. The girl then suddenly reaches into her jacket and pulls out a knife, which makes it pretty obvious at that point that she had actually been a part of that same thug gang the whole entire time. Tien reacts almost instantly and lands a sharp and well-placed elbow strike right on her, sending the knife slipping straight out of her hand and dropping to the ground. The moment all the others standing around see what just happened, every single one of them spins around and takes off running away from there as fast as their legs can carry them. Later that night, Tien makes his way back to his usual pharmacy store where the worker behind the counter recognizes him right away and asks if he is back again to pick up medication for his sister. Tien tells him that he managed to make some decent money recently, so he figured he would go ahead and buy something a little more premium than usual this time around. After picking up everything he needs from the shop, the worker sends him off by telling him to grab some pork ribs on his way home and use them to put together a nice herbal soup for her. As he is making his way back home, Tien happens to cross paths with a cat that he has been feeding every single day and finds himself thinking that she still has not grown even a tiny little bit despite all the food he has been giving her this whole time. Tien thinks about how the cat has been living in this park for the past 2 months now, and that if she really does not have anywhere else to go, he might as well just adopt her and bring her home. However, he then snaps back to reality and reminds himself that he could easily end up dying in a fight at any given moment, and so he does not think he is really in any position to take on that kind of responsibility, so he gently sets the cat back down on the ground and turns to leave. But the cat is not having any of it and starts biting down on his leg as if she is desperately trying to get him to follow her somewhere. The cat then leads Tien over to a strange and unusual looking plant and seems to want him to eat something that is growing right off of it. The moment Tien puts the mysterious thing in his mouth and eats it, a powerful surge of energy begins rushing through his entire body and every single memory from his past suddenly comes flooding back to him all at once. Right at that moment, a voice speaks up and tells him to go ahead and enjoy the incredible power that is now coursing through his veins and to consider it a true blessing. Tien immediately gets overwhelmed with excitement and finds himself barely able to wait to find out what else this mysterious voice has in store for him next. After everything that happened, Tien finally makes his way back home only to find his sisterling absolutely furious at him for coming back a whole 30 minutes later than he usually does. Tien quickly apologizes to her for being late and tells her that he brought something along to make it up to her, and she is completely shocked when she sees that it is a 1,000-year ginseng. Tien then clarifies that it is actually only a 20-year-old ginseng since he cannot quite afford the 1,000-year-old one just yet. He then tells her that she should not worry about anything else at all because the only thing that really matters right now is her getting better. On their way, a boy suddenly spots Ling holding the ginseng and immediately accuses her of stealing it straight from their pharmacy. He goes on to say that the ginseng is easily worth 20 grand and demands to know why she would go ahead and steal something like that. Ling fires back and argues that her brother had bought it for her fair and square, but the guy is not buying it at all and argues that someone as poor as Tien could never afford something like that, making it pretty obvious to him that it must have been stolen. Hearing that, Tien does not even hesitate for a single second and straight away throws a punch at him, making it absolutely clear that he is not going to let anyone lay a finger on his sister. Another guy then steps in and calls Tien completely crazy for raising his hand against his own cousin like that, but Tien fires back and says that he refuses to acknowledge him as his cousin when the guy does not even have the decency to see his mother as his aunt. The guy then starts cursing Tien's mother out loud and throws it in his face that she is not even his real mother to begin with. Hearing that, Tien gets even more furious than he already was, and when the security team shows up and tries to step in and stop him, he calmly pulls out a letter and holds it right up for all of them to see. He makes it crystal clear to every single one of them that he is now an official boxer of Tien Wu Gym and that they had better think twice before messing with him. He also warns them straight up that if anything happens to him and that ends up interfering with an official match in any way, there is absolutely no way they are going to be able to afford to cover their losses no matter what they try to do about it. Later that night, Ling tells Chen that he was so incredibly cool back there during the whole situation, but Chen brushes it off without much of a reaction and tells her to stop talking and just focus on drinking her soup so that it can help her start feeling better. When she takes a sip of the soup, a little girl suddenly appears right out of her locket, and Chen finds himself thinking that someone might actually be sharing nutrients with Ling somehow. He then starts wondering whether this spirit is the same one that Ling is always talking to, and notices that she looks almost exactly like a younger version of Ling herself. Ling then turns to Chen and asks him whether he can actually see her. The little girl then looks up at Chen and sincerely thanks him for absolutely everything he has ever done for Ling over all this time. In response, Chen gently reaches out and touches her head and encourages her warmly, telling her that she is a truly lovely child. The following day, Chen heads back to his gym and gets straight into some strength training on the boxing bag. He keeps on throwing various punches and kicks at the bag one after another, but still ends up walking away with a score of only 400. He thinks to himself that it looks like the red fruit he ate the day before had actually been quite the serious power-up, and that as long as he stays careful and smart about things, he should be able to get through the 5 matches without too much trouble. Just then, Chen's friend shows up out of nowhere and hits him with some bad news right off the bat. It turns out that there is a guy over at their gym who is currently training with a 400-pound boxing sandbag, and the sight of it alone is enough to make everyone standing around genuinely believe that things are going to be incredibly tough and that there is a very real chance Chen might end up on the losing side when he goes up against him. Chen takes a moment to watch the guy train for himself and is left completely stunned by what he sees, thinking to himself that the guy's legs move like a perfectly sharpened blade and that anyone with eyes can tell right away that he has put an absolutely enormous amount of hard work and dedication into building himself up to this level. The guy's friend speaks up and says that the force behind his strikes is at least 1,000 pounds, adding that he expected absolutely nothing less from someone like him, and that with just a single hit Chen is going to be finished. However, Chen's friend is quick to fire back and points out that there is a whole lot more to boxing than just raw power alone. He also brings up the fact that there was a guy just like Mad Dog who was also unbelievably strong and physical, yet he still ended up on the losing side when he went up against Chen. Chen's opponent then shoots back and says that the only reason that guy lost was because he had been up to no good during the fight, and that Chen is at best only capable of putting out around 400 pounds of force on his own. Hearing that, everyone around them bursts out laughing, but Chen's friend is absolutely furious and demands to know how they even have the nerve to show up here and taunt them after what they did to Tingwei. Chen's friend then turns to him and points out straight up that fighters who have not received any kind of formal training like themselves do not stand even the slightest chance against someone like Iron Wolf, and that he could clearly tell that Iron Wolf had been holding back quite a bit when the two of them had fought the day before. However, Chen pushes back and tells him that as long as he puts in the hard work and trains seriously, he genuinely believes that he will be able to close the gap between them at least somewhat. After that whole conversation wraps up, Chen makes up his mind to go pay Yushin a visit, figuring to himself that she is a pretty mysterious person and is most likely only helping him out of pity. Chen then makes his way up to the top floor and is completely shocked when he sees just how luxurious and over the top the living area up there really is for the higher-ups. Right at that moment, a blue-haired guy suddenly appears right in front of him and tells him flat out that he is in completely the wrong area and has no business being up there. The guy then gets really angry and tells Chen that he has some serious nerve showing up on the 18th floor like that and warns him that he should get out of there before someone ends up breaking his legs and throwing him right off the floor. Chen calmly tells him that Dr. Shin was the one who told him to come and meet her here. Hearing that, the guy pauses for a moment and thinks to himself that he must be talking about senior disciple Shin and starts wondering what kind of relationship the two of them could possibly have with each other. Deep down though, he also starts thinking that this might actually be a pretty good opportunity for him to go ahead and talks to her as well while he has the chance. The guy then turns to Chen and tells him to go ahead and follow him. As they make their way over, Chen quietly uses his powers to size the guy up and figures out that this person is actually even stronger than Iron Wolf, which catches him a little off guard. His secret inner voice then chimes in and warns him to stay on guard and be careful because the guy is carrying a gun on him. However, this only makes Chen even more curious and he starts wondering why there are security guards posted around the area and whether Yushin is actually something much more than just an ordinary doctor. The guy then introduces himself as Guofei Lin and explains that he is a practitioner of the Hong-style fist. Lin then asks Chen what clan is he from and who's his master, but Chen has no idea what he is even talking about. Chen tells him that he is just a sparring partner from the first floor and he doesn't belong to any specific clan. After that, they finally arrive at Shin's door and Lin knocks the door, saying he brought her guest Shin here, so she should let him know if she needs something. Here is the paraphrased version. Shin tells Lin that Chen is allowed to come in by himself, which immediately makes Lin green with jealousy. When Chen actually steps into the room, he is completely caught off guard to find that Shin is drenched in sweat and is in the middle of working through some kung fu moves on her own. Shin then brings him inside and sits him down for some tea, while Chen finds himself thinking that she comes across as so serious and stern, yet somehow, he feels completely relaxed and at ease whenever he is around her. He then gets pleasantly surprised when he realizes that the tea she is serving him is actually even better than the medicine that Ling has been taking this whole time. Shin then asks him whether he knows who his opponent is going to be for his next fight, and Chen tells her that it is Iron Wolf. Shin explains that Iron Wolf had graduated with outstanding results straight out of the training camp of death, and that his fighting style is one that puts the physical aspect of combat above absolutely everything else. She also points out that under normal circumstances Chen would not stand even the slightest chance against him, but that it is not completely impossible for him to make it through the fight alive. She tells him that she is willing to help him out and lays out the terms of a deal, explaining that she will teach him how to fight properly and that in return he is going to help her out with something on her end. Chen then asks her what exactly that something is, but she tells him to keep it a secret for now and that they should just wait and see how the fight turns out first before getting into all of that. Furthermore, Chen asks her why she would go to all this trouble for someone like him. Shin says that she can tell that he has immense potential and that he has a strong will, most importantly he has a good head on his shoulders. She further adds that his abilities are somewhere around the level of a grade D boxer, yet he managed to take down Mad Dog. Chen gets nervous and thinks that that's a master for her, analyzing the strength and skill level of her opponents like it's nothing at all. Shin gets herself ready to teach him some new moves and kicks things off by demonstrating her own personal fighting technique. She explains that any fight at its core is simply a battle of strength and skill, and that in order to break through Iron Wolf's extremely well-trained and hardened physique, he is going to have to master two specific jings that she is about to teach him right now. Shin then drops into her fighting stance and throws a punch straight out into the open air that carries such a powerful and intense aura behind it that it actually manages to hit the tree standing in front of her from a distance. Chen is completely caught off guard by what he just witnessed and finds himself thinking about how she is somehow able to deliver such an explosive amount of power with nothing more than a single punch. Shin then keeps going and continues showing him various techniques one after another while Chen does his absolute best to keep up with her, though it is proving to be really tough since she is moving way too fast for him to follow comfortably. Chen then decides to use his special abilities to try and memorize her movements more carefully, but is completely caught off guard when he realizes that his abilities are somehow showing her without any clothes on. Shin then picks up on the fact that he is clearly not paying attention and snaps at him, telling him to get his head back in the game since she is only going to go through this with him 3 times in total, and if he cannot get it figured out by then he is completely on his own after that. After that, Shin tires to continue with a demonstration of this fighting style, but Chen's face is just red because he is getting weird thoughts about her. He makes an excuse and tells her that he just had too much ginseng yesterday. Moreover, Shin continues to explain that he draws his power from the ground and center it around his waist. She also says that is the key to mastering this move is the movement of his shoulders and his waist. Sometime later, Shin finishes with her first training session and asks Chen if he remember what she taught him. However, Chen barely focused on the training and more on her body. Shin felt weird and thinks that he looks so lost for someone with no training. Her moves could be too complex. Shin then tells him to follow along with her since they are going to go pay a visit to her uncle who might just have a nice little surprise waiting for them when they get there. It turns out that Shin's uncle is already in the middle of playing a board game with Lin when they arrive. At some point during the game, the uncle suddenly gets all fired up and slams Lin right into the wall, telling him that he has noticed that his footsteps have become somewhat lighter recently and that this is a clear sign that he must have been slacking off on his training lately. Right at that moment, Shin and Chen walk into the room together, and Shin's uncle immediately reaches out and throws something in Chen's direction which Chen manages to catch without any trouble. Chen finds himself thinking that this old geezer must be someone truly special given the fact that he is able to control his energy and his movements to such an impressive extent. Shin's uncle then turns to her and questions how Chen is possibly going to hold his own in a fight when he could barely even get past a grade C fighter, but she tells him not to worry about any of that since all that really matters at the end of the day is what she personally thinks of him. Later on, Chen turns to Shin and asks her whether there is something really valuable inside the box that her uncle handed over to him. Shin tells him straight up that it is absolutely priceless, explaining that inside that box is the Blood River pill which works to build up and greatly enhance his entire body from the inside out. Later that night, Tien makes it back to his room and finds his thoughts drifting over to the pill that is sitting inside that box. He thinks back to what Shin had told him, remembering that there are only 3 of them in total and that they are meant specifically for strengthening and enhancing his body from the inside out. Tien starts thinking about whether he could just go ahead and give it to his sister instead, but then he also remembers that Shin had made it very clear that in order to even take the pill in the first place, a person's body needs to already be in peak physical condition, and that if he were to give it to his sister in the state she is currently in, there is simply no way her body would be able to handle it at all. However, Tien then finds himself puzzled and wonders how Shin had even known what he was thinking in the first place, and she tells him plainly that he is like a completely open book and that there is really nothing difficult about reading him at all. She also goes on to tell him that now that he is working for her, she is going to arrange for someone to come and take a proper look at his sister and see what can be done. She had also mentioned to him that based on his current physique and physical condition, the pill should realistically be able to add a few hundred extra pounds of force to his strikes, and that he is going to have to wait and discover whatever other side effects might come along with taking it a little further down the road. Back in the present, Tien decides to go ahead and take the pill to see whether it is actually going to make any real difference for him heading into his upcoming match. The moment Tien swallows the pill, he immediately feels like his entire body is suddenly on fire and his muscles start throbbing and pulsing intensely all at once. After that, Tien bolts straight out of his house and throws himself into all kinds of different exercises one after another without stopping. He manages to knock out a straight 300 push-ups in what feels like barely even a second, and by the time he is done he genuinely feels like he is already operating at the level of a grade C boxer. 3 days later, everyone makes their way over to Tien Wu Gym and gathers together for Tien's highly anticipated upcoming match. The sheer number of people who have shown up just to watch Tien fight and see how he is going to hold up against his opponent is absolutely massive and unlike anything the gym has seen in a while. The announcer then gets things started by stepping up and introducing Iron Wolf to the crowd, describing him as the top graduate to ever come out of the 38th cohort of the death camp, and making it very clear that ever since Iron Wolf was promoted to grade C he has gone on an absolutely unbroken undefeated streak across every single one of his matches without exception. Tien's friend is sitting there getting increasingly nervous by the second, thinking to himself that if Iron Wolf really decides to go all out and hold absolutely nothing back, even he himself would not be able to last through more than 10 moves against him. The announcer then goes on to highlight that Iron Wolf's greatest and most feared specialty is his unstoppable blade-like kicks that have made him such a terrifying opponent to face. Just then, Iron Wolf makes his entrance and steps into the ring, and the entire crowd immediately erupts into enthusiastic cheers for him simply because he is already so familiar to everyone there. Next, the announcer moves on and introduces Chen, describing him as the Golden Spar Challenger representing Tien Wu Gym. He further mentions that 2 full years of sparring experience have helped Chen build up an incredibly solid and impenetrable defense that nobody has managed to break through up to this point. Chen then makes his own entrance and steps into the ring as well, but the crowd barely even notices or reacts to him at all, with the only exception being his friend who is still over there cheering his heart out for him regardless. Meanwhile, a boy named Xian Tang along with Jia Peng, who is completely distracted and busy with the women around him, finds himself unable to believe that Iron Wolf is actually out there fighting today. Peng speaks up and says that he has always had a soft spot for Iron Wolf, especially his kick-based fighting style which is genuinely one of a kind at the grade C level. Hearing that, another guy sitting in the room jumps in and declares that Iron Wolf is going to absolutely destroy Chen out there, and points out that people like Chen have been showing up a whole lot more frequently ever since they first opened up the fights to the public. One of the guys then turns to Tang and asks him whether he feels like placing a bet on the outcome, but Tang thinks to himself that most of the outsiders who show up to these things are really only here for the women and the booze and do not have even the slightest clue about the real significance and meaning behind these fights. He also finds himself wondering whether the Southern Style Fist Association is really going to go as far as throwing this fight completely or not. He then turns to everyone in the room and announces that he is putting all of his money on Chen, which immediately catches everyone off guard and surprises them. The boys all burst out laughing and ask him whether he genuinely believes that the fancy and graceful moves of Southern-style martial arts stand even the slightest real chance against the brutal and ruthless violence that comes straight out of the death camp. Tang also points out that it does not even take a big and bulky body to come out on top in these kinds of fights. Back in the ring, the announcer steps up and makes it clear to both fighters that whoever steps outside of the ring or finds themselves unable to fight back will be declared the loser of the match. Chen thinks to himself that killing the opponent is also counted as a win, which makes it pretty clear to him why Iron Wolf had been so eager and determined to get into this fight with him in the first place. On top of that, Iron Wolf gets right in Chen's face and tells him straight up that he is going to break every single bone in his body, and that if Chen can somehow manage to take 3 of his kicks without going down, he will go ahead and spare his life. The match then kicks off with Iron Wolf going straight at Chen right from the start, but Chen manages to leap backwards and create some distance between them just in time. Iron Wolf then launches a high kick straight at Chen, but Chen manages to get his block up and stop it, which catches Iron Wolf completely off guard and leaves him visibly surprised. Chen then takes the opening and lands a clean and completely unexpected punch right in Iron Wolf's face out of nowhere. Iron Wolf immediately tells himself that he had let his guard down and gotten careless, and that is the only reason Chen was able to capitalize on the moment the way he did, and he makes up his mind on the spot that he is going to turn things around and make Chen pay for it. Iron Wolf then launches back into the fight and starts throwing all kinds of different blows at Chen one after another, but Chen manages to read each one of them and dodge out of the way every single time. Chen then instantly fires a punch straight back at Iron Wolf's face, and the sight of it leaves absolutely nobody in the crowd able to believe what they are watching unfold right in front of them. Chen then keeps pushing and continues to go at Iron Wolf head on, all while thinking to himself that one of those kicks had nearly taken his entire arm clean off, and that if he ends up eating another hit like that one he is completely finished. On the other side of things, Iron Wolf finds himself unable to believe just how strong Chen has gotten, to the point where he genuinely cannot find even a single opening to launch an attack through. Chen then winds up and throws an incredibly powerful punch straight at Iron Wolf, but before anything further can happen the round comes to an end and the bell goes off. Shin, who has been watching the whole match from the sidelines, immediately thinks to herself that the timing of that bell had felt really strange and off. It is then that she notices Master Paolo quietly slipping some money to the referee because things had been getting way too uncomfortable and dangerous for Iron Wolf out there. Iron Wolf's friend walks over and asks him if he is doing alright, and despite being completely worn out, Iron Wolf tells him that Chen had simply caught him off guard and that was the only reason things went the way they did. He then finds himself wondering when exactly Chen had become such a difficult person to deal with and makes it clear to himself that he absolutely cannot let anyone else find out that he is actually walking away from this with internal injuries. Earlier on, Paolo had pulled Iron Wolf aside and told him that ever since the whole incident involving Mad Dog and the sparring guy had gotten out and spread around, there had been a whole lot of negative consequences coming down on the death camp as a result of it. Iron Wolf gets noticeably nervous when he hears this and quickly asks Paolo whether someone out there is looking to cause trouble for them. Paolo then tells him that his senior from the previous year had only barely managed to defeat the Southern Style Fist Association and had gone on to become the only person in all of Sea City to be selected as one of Skyra's chosen. Paolo then pulls out some photographs of the 18th floor and holds them up, asking Iron Wolf to explain why exactly Chen would have any business being up on the 18th floor of the Tien Wu Association building in the first place. Paolo then steps in closer to him and makes it clear that it does not matter one bit whether the guy is from the Southern Style Fist Association or not, because all they really need to focus on right now is winning back the honor and reputation that the death camp has lost. Back in the present, Iron Wolf finds himself with absolutely no choice left and ends up taking some kind of strange and unknown drug. After that, the second round is just about ready to get started and Chen makes his way up to the ring, thinking to himself that Iron Wolf had already taken some serious internal injuries during the previous round. The match gets underway with Iron Wolf looking completely like a zombie as he charges straight at Chen, who immediately senses that something is seriously off about the whole situation. Iron Wolf then suddenly launches a devastatingly powerful kick at Chen that ends up fracturing his bone on impact. Iron Wolf then keeps pushing forward and continues to go after Chen like an absolute monster unleashed, and everyone in the crowd watching the whole thing unfold starts to realize that what they are seeing right now is completely and utterly different from anything they witnessed during the first half of the match. Chen quickly puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that Iron Wolf must have taken the Zai pill, and that this is the exact reason why he is suddenly so unbelievably strong all of a sudden. Chen calls him out and asks whether he is not at all worried about getting into serious trouble for taking forbidden substances during a match like this, but Iron Wolf just shoots right back and asks him whether he honestly thinks that this is some kind of official match they are having right now. He then keeps coming at Chen relentlessly with all kinds of punches and kicks thrown together, and Chen starts thinking to himself that it is really starting to look like he is getting squashed like a helpless bug out there. After taking hit after hit, Chen finds himself getting completely forced back into a corner by Iron Wolf's never-ending flurry of kicks and can barely even manage to lift a single finger to defend himself properly. Chen's friends are screaming at him from the sidelines to just get out of the ring before he ends up getting himself killed, but Chen flat out refuses to give up and surrender. He then digs deep and recalls the practice moves that Shin had gone through with him and manages to pull off a clean block against one of Iron Wolf's powerful kicks. He then follows it up immediately by landing a whole bunch of strikes on Iron Wolf one after another that leaves absolutely everyone watching completely shocked and surprised. Iron Wolf finally collapses to the ground and Chen is officially announced as the new winner of the match. The entire crowd then erupts and starts cheering loudly for Chen, saying that he is really something else. Back in the locker room, Chen is barely holding it together as he is completely and utterly exhausted from everything, but Shin shows up right on time and begins carefully placing acupuncture needles all over his body. Shin turns to Chen's friend and explains that Chen has taken some pretty serious damage and that she is using the acupuncture needles to help improve the flow of his blood and his qi and get things moving properly again. Once she finishes up, Chen starts to feel a whole lot better than he did before, and Shin tells him that she honestly cannot believe that he managed to master what she had taught him in such a ridiculously short amount of time. Chen's friend then gets busy tallying up exactly how much money Chen managed to rake in that night, and Chen gets visibly excited when he starts hearing just how much he is actually walking away with. However, Shin steps in and tells him to get himself properly treated first before he goes anywhere near collecting his money. Meanwhile, people around the gym are talking amongst themselves about how Iron Wolf turned out to be nothing but trash in the end, pointing out that despite having graduated from the death camp of all places, he had still ended up fighting like a complete maniac out there. Tang then tells everyone that he already warned them not to judge a book by its cover and says that Chen doesn't look like much but he has been trained in martial arts. The other guy then writes him a check on the spot since he had gone and lost the bet fair and square. Over at the Tien Wu gym head manager's office, nobody can quite wrap their head around the fact that Iron Wolf had actually gone and lost like that. One of the death camp guys walks up to Paolo and tells him straight to his face that even though he had gone through all that trouble to set things up so that Iron Wolf could get his revenge, he had still managed to damage their reputation there at the death camp by losing anyway. Hearing that, Paolo completely loses his temper and even goes as far as destroying his own desk in a fit of rage. Paolo then sits with his thoughts and starts thinking that losing to the Southern Style Fist Association like this is really going to hurt his chances of being selected as one of Skyra's chosen this year, and with Mingyi already keeping a close eye on everything he does not think that going the assassination route is even a viable option at this point. Sometime later, Paolo's secretary shows up and informs him that the department head is requesting a meeting with him and that it has something to do with Skyra's chosen. The secretary also mentions that he might end up having to cut some kind of deal with the people over at Eden, and that if he goes ahead and does that, he will secure his spot as one of Skyra's chosen. Meanwhile, Chen is absolutely losing his mind over the ridiculous amount of money that Tang had sent his way for his match against Iron Wolf. Chen and his friend then start goofing around and messing with each other, which prompts Shin to step in and scold the both of them. She hands a medicine over to Chen and tells him straight up that he needs to take it if he actually wants to get better anytime soon. Chen finds himself thinking that Shin comes across as incredibly strict and serious whenever she puts her glasses on. Once he is done taking the medicine, Shin tells him to go ahead and follow her, but Chen's friend immediately jumps in and asks him when exactly he had gotten so close with her and why he had not bothered to mention anything about it to him. After that, Chen's friend gets ready to head out and tells Chen that he should make sure to teach him those really impressive moves of his whenever he gets the chance. Once he is gone and the two of them are alone, Shin reaches up and starts taking off her clothes, telling him that she is going to reward him with something really special. Seeing that completely unexpected sight right in front of him, Chen immediately freaks out and his mind starts racing in all kinds of wild and messy directions all at once. Shin then tells him to stop being such a freak about it because all she was actually planning to do was teach him the dummy strikes. She tells him that she already knows that the last time he came over, he had been secretly memorizing everything on his own, and she goes on to explain that the Wing Chun style is pretty open and relaxed about these things, so he is more than welcome to go ahead and pass it on to his friends if he ever feels like it. She further points out that he still does not have nearly a strong enough foundation to be working from, and that he has not even taken the time to properly learn the most basic stances that everything else is built on top of. Chen then asks her whether all of that is really as important as she is making it out to be, and she does not hesitate for even a second before firing back and telling him that if he had actually managed to get the dummy strikes down before he ever climbed into the ring to face Iron Wolf, he could have walked away with the win completely clean without ever needing to move a single step from where he stood. She also makes it very clear that if he truly understands what she is telling him, then he seriously needs to buckle down and start paying a whole lot more attention to the details once he has had enough time to fully recover, and that he should be practicing it exactly the same way that she goes about doing it herself. Later that night, Chen brings the same cat he had been feeding at the park back home with him, and both Ling and the other girl are absolutely thrilled and more than happy to take her in and adopt her. Ling quickly figures out that the cat must be pretty hungry, so she heads off to go grab some milk for her, but on her way over she nearly loses her balance and almost takes a bad fall. Chen immediately tenses up and gets really worried for her, but she reassures him that she is perfectly fine and tells him that thanks to the medicine he has been going out of his way to buy for her, she has actually been feeling a whole lot better lately. 2 weeks later, Chen is sitting alone in his room thinking to himself that there has been absolutely no progress made whatsoever. He reads through various sources and comes to the frustrating realization that there are just so many incurable diseases out there that it really does not make any difference how many medical journals someone like him, a complete outsider to the medical field, sits down and reads through. Getting more and more frustrated by the minute, he eventually gives up and just lays back on his bed, and it is right then that he suddenly remembers that Shin had told him she was going to look into finding a doctor for him. Chen then gets himself up and heads outside, and shortly after a guy wearing a cap starts following behind him at a distance, quietly telling the person on the other end of his phone that Chen is currently heading in the direction of Tien Wu Gym and is taking his usual path straight through the park. Sometime later, Chen makes it over to Shin's place and she takes one look at him and figures out right away that he is there because of his sister. Chen asks her how she could possibly have known that, and she tells him that she had known from the very first time he had shown up at her door in a total panic. Shin then goes on to tell him that she has actually come across a case very similar to his sister's before, and that even someone as skilled and experienced as Bowen had been completely unable to do anything about it. So, at this point, she thinks who they need is the Holy Needle Devil Hands himself. Shin also says that she found a doctor who is an old man in the medical association who goes by the name of One Needle Mo, and he's overseas right now. Chen asks her if he can really cure Ling because the doctors they met before told them there was too much yin energy in her body. Shin then says that there was a case like this long ago and Dr. Mo and a few Taoists from Longhu Mountain worked together to cure him. Hearing that, Chen freaks out because she wants Taoists to cure an illness. Shin tells him that she cannot share any more details beyond what she has already told him, but that he should just hold on to the fact that there is indeed a way out there to cure his sister. Chen then makes up his mind to head back to the gym and start training for his next fight, but before he goes Shin hands him a small device and tells him that if he ever finds himself in any kind of trouble, all he needs to do is press the button and she will immediately be able to see and hear exactly what is going on wherever he is. Chen finds himself genuinely puzzled as to why she is even going out of her way to hand something like this over to him, and she calmly explains that the people over at Tien Wu are a whole lot more complicated and layered than he currently gives them credit for. He then pushes a little further and asks her why she even has something like this on her person in the first place, and Shin goes ahead and drops the bombshell that she is actually a special operations officer, which catches Chen completely off guard and leaves him even more surprised than he already was. Chen starts to freak out a little on the inside as the unsettling thought begins to creep into his head that he might be slowly getting himself pulled right into the middle of something that is way bigger than he ever bargained for and possibly even on the wrong side of the law. On his way back home, Chen is suddenly caught completely off guard when a strange guy wearing a mask jumps out and ambushes him out of absolutely nowhere. Meanwhile, back at Shin's clinic, a strange and overly familiar nurse asks her if she wants her to help change her but Shin immediately smacks her for being such a complete freak about it. The nurse then shifts gears and informs her that Sky Eye number 3 has just activated, which means that something is going down somewhere out there. Shin quickly figures out that the person caught on the device is Chen and that he is currently mixed up in a confrontation with a skinny guy who is jumping around all over the place like a monkey. Shin then recognizes the style right away and realizes that it is the Tan style leg technique from the Northern clan and that the level of skill on display is sharp and well refined enough to suggest that his ability is most likely sitting somewhere around the peak of grade C. Shin then asks the nurse where exactly Chen is located right now, and the nurse gets a little worried and asks her whether she is seriously planning on going over there herself. Shin tells her flat out that she has no choice but to go, since Chen is an important piece in her plans after all and she cannot afford to let anything happen to him. The nurse quickly works out the route and lets Shin know that Chen is currently near 8 Mile Well by Ocean Park, which puts him at around 13 kilometers away from Tien Wu Gym. Without wasting another second, Shin leaps straight out of the window and takes off after Chen, thinking to herself that based on everything she just saw, the guy has to be Song Shan, the prized and most talented disciple of Sanmei Tan, the renowned master of the Tan-style leg technique from the Northern clan. She also thinks to herself that Chen has only been studying Wing Chun for less than 2 weeks at this point, which means he is nowhere near ready to be a real match for him. On the other hand, Chen is already right in the middle of a fight with that guy, and he quickly picks up on the fact that the opponent's leg-based fighting style is so incredibly quick that his kicks are actually coming in even faster than Iron Wolf's ever did. Chen makes the decision to hold him off by relying on his dummy strikes and keeps pushing forward with his attacks as best he can. The opponent then suddenly switches things up and launches a completely different kind of kick at Chen that manages to slice a clean cut right across his forehead. On top of that, the opponent tells himself that all he really needs to do at this point is find a way to get Chen down on the ground and it will all be over. He then throws another powerful kick straight at Chen, but Chen manages to read it just in time and uses his skills to dodge out of the way before pushing the guy back. Feeling genuinely thrown off and confused by this, the opponent finds himself thinking that Chen had somehow managed to protect all of his vital parts even while being stuck in such an unfavorable position. He then looks at Chen and tells him straight up that his reflexes are actually pretty impressive, and that he is going to have no choice but to go completely all out if he wants any real shot at dealing with him properly. At the same time, the young master and the guy with the cap from before are watching the whole fight play out from a distance, and the young master thinks to himself that Chen was no longer any real match for Song Shan the very moment he decided to get serious about things. The match then keeps going with the opponent spinning around in midair and launching a series of kicks straight at Chen one after another. However, Chen quickly realizes that he is completely trapped within his opponent's strike range and that the only realistic thing he can do at this point is try his best to absorb and reduce the power behind his kicks just a little bit. Chen then somehow manages to land a solid punch on him that ends up hurting him quite a lot more than he was expecting. The opponent is completely stunned and cannot wrap his head around the fact that Chen had actually managed to survive his ultimate move after everything he had thrown at him. In a flashback, it is revealed that the young master had gone ahead and hired the opponent as a hitman to take Chen out, and the guy is genuinely shocked when he finds out that Chen is actually the newest Wing Chun disciple. He also tells the young master straight up that he cannot go through with it because his own master happens to be close friends with Sanjiang Shin of the Wing Chun style, and that going after one of his disciples is going to cause a massive and serious problem for everyone involved. The young master then brushes off his concerns and tells the guy that his master has got to be pretty old by now anyway, and on top of that he promises to pay him even more money if he just goes ahead and gets the job done. On his way back home afterward, the guy finds himself lost in his own thoughts, thinking about how no matter how generous and kind his boss has been toward him over all these years, his master is still ultimately the one single person in his life that he owes absolutely everything to. He also finds himself wondering that if his master had not been the one to step in and do something when he did, his boss would never have even bothered to bring him down from the mountain in the first place. However, he eventually shakes all of those thoughts off and brings himself back to reality, reminding himself that the only thing that truly matters at this particular moment in time is getting his hands on the money he was promised, because the moment he has it in his hands he is going to put every single bit of it toward doing something to help his master. Back in the present, the opponent gets himself completely fired up and throws himself into a brand new and relentless wave of attacks aimed straight at Chen, holding absolutely nothing back this time around. Seeing how bad things are getting, the nurse quickly gets Shin on the line and urgently tells her to hurry up and get there faster because Chen is at the point where he cannot do anything except try to defend himself and hold on. Shin thinks to herself that there is a very specific reason why she chose Chen in the first place, and that is because he only just recently started learning Wing Chun. So as long as he keeps his guard up and sticks to defending the way he has been doing, he should be able to hang in there long enough for her to make it over to him. The opponent then notices that Chen can barely even use both of his hands anymore given how badly bruised up he is all over. However, right at that moment the voice inside Chen's head speaks up and urges him to make a move because right now is his chance to turn things around. Using every last bit of potential he has, Chen unleashes a powerful kick at the guy that sends him crashing hard into the ground. The opponent lies there completely stunned and finds himself wondering how on earth Chen was even able to pull off the Tan-style leg technique like that. The voice inside Chen's head then quickly chimes in and points out that the opponent's footsteps are all over the place and completely disorganized because he is angry and tells him that right now is the perfect moment to go on the counterattack. Chen still can barely wrap his head around the fact that he actually managed to land that kick just now, and the voice in his head reassures him that it was all thanks to him and promises to fill him in on everything in more detail once he manages to survive the counterattack that is coming his way. Chen then activates his ability and channels everything he has into a kick aimed straight at the opponent as his counterattack. He then follows it up with a devastating punch that sends the opponent flying clean through the air before he comes crashing down hard onto the ground. Feeling completely and utterly drained, Chen thinks to himself that it had been so incredibly close that he had genuinely almost lost his life just now. Chen then turns to the masked guy and demands to know who sent him, and the masked guy shoots back that he is a professional hitman who would never under any circumstances betray the identity of his client. The voice inside Chen's head then urges him to stop wasting time talking and just finish him off already, but Chen chooses not to go through with it. Chen explains that going ahead and killing him would only end up creating even more trouble for himself, and that he simply cannot afford to go overboard with something like that right now. Before walking away, Chen turns back and tells the masked guy to stop going around and troubling innocent strangers from now on. He also thinks to himself that he had already switched on the Sky Eye device, so Shin should be showing up to deal with the rest of the situation pretty shortly. The moment Chen is gone, the young master strolls over and starts mocking the masked guy for not even being able to take down someone as inexperienced as Chen. The masked guy then fires back and points out that Chen was barely even at grade D level when he first started fighting, and that in less than 2 weeks his ability has already managed to shoot past grade C entirely. He also adds that someone like Chen is going to either rise up or become the brightest shining star the martial world has ever seen, or end up being the very thing that brings it all crashing down to its ruin. On the other side of things, Shin is busy trying to figure out who exactly sent these people in the first place and makes up her mind to follow them and see where they lead so she can get some answers. However, before she can make a move, a guy suddenly appears right behind her and tries to land a hit on her, but she reads it instantly and dodges out of the way without any trouble at all. She then attacks the guy wearing an eye mask and asks who he is. But the guy doesn't reply to her and keep on throwing punches one after another. The guy sews some kind of smoke bomb and vanishes from there. In the meantime, the young master and the masked guy are going somewhere in car, and young master tells the masked guy that he is thankful for his help. The person driving the car says that he didn't expect the masked guy to be this useless, so the young master says that he might be useless but his master isn't. Later that night, the young master takes the masked guy to somewhere far and kills him, so that he don't have to worry about him showing up. It turns out, the guy with young master is even more clever and he is the one who murdered him, saying they should focus on some more important things now. Meanwhile, Chen is spending his time working through punch after punch on the wooden kung fu training dummy, trying his best to keep up with his practice. He is so worn out and physically weak at this point that even just getting through a few sets of punches is enough to leave his hands hurting really badly. While he takes a break and drinks some juice, the cat suddenly comes out of nowhere and drops right onto his head, and as Chen recovers from the surprise he notices that there is something unusual sitting right on top of the cat's head. All of a sudden, Chen starts hearing that same familiar voice inside his head again, and the voice tells him that he is there to fulfill a promise that he had made at some point before. Chen immediately asks the person who he actually is and how he is even able to communicate with him in a way like this. The person calmly tells Chen that he can go ahead and call him Gu, explaining that he is essentially his own alter ego. Chen thinks to himself that this person is clearly just messing around with him and not being serious, but Gu pushes back and insists that he is very much a real and separate personality that exists right there inside of him. Hearing all of that, Chen's mind drifts back to a memory from when he was just a small child, when a strange and mysterious beam of energy had suddenly gone straight into his body. He then gets genuinely scared and shakily asks the person what exactly he is supposed to be. Gu says that he don't know, but he only know that he came from different world and all his memories apart from that began the moment he entered his body. He also says that his task right now is still to protect him and he don't have any reasons to deceive him. Gu also brings up the fact that he himself has personally witnessed Chen's remarkable ability to pick things up at an incredibly fast pace and points out that this ability has only gotten even stronger ever since Chen went ahead and ate the crimson fire fruit. Chen then finds himself thinking that with Gu right there beside him, he might actually have a genuine shot at pulling himself out of this really difficult situation he has found himself in. On top of that, Chen raises the question of whether Gu could simply leave his body altogether, pointing out that since the two of them share both body and mind, that would also mean that Gu would no longer be around to protect him anymore. The strange and unusual cat then suddenly sinks its teeth right into Chen out of nowhere, which makes him absolutely furious, but before he can react properly, Ling comes walking in and shows up unexpectedly. Chen quickly tells her that she needs to head back to bed since he still has a few other things that he needs to take care of right now. Gu then steps in and makes it clear to Chen that there is one very important piece of information he absolutely needs to hear right now, and that is the fact that this particular cat is actually the key to unlocking the answer to saving his sister once and for all. The very next day, Shin wakes up and spends some time alone with her thoughts, coming to the frustrating realization that she had been completely unable to dig up even a single useful piece of information about everything that had gone down the previous day. She also sits there thinking that the masked man who had shown up during the whole situation had looked remarkably similar to someone belonging to their enemy's side, and that when she looks back at everything, the entire thing appeared to have been very carefully and very deliberately planned and set up well ahead of time by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Chen then picks up her phone and goes ahead and unlocks it, only to be met with the shocking discovery that someone had gone and murdered the very same guy who had gotten into that intense fight with Chen not all that long ago, and the moment she sees that, it immediately makes her feel deep down that something very dangerous is slowly but surely unfolding all around them. The next day, Chen makes his way over to the medical room to go and apologize to Shin for all the trouble and hassle he had ended up causing her the other day. When he steps inside the room, he is immediately caught off guard to find Shin staring at him in a way that makes it pretty clear she feels like he did something wrong, and he also notices that there is a nurse present in the room as well. The nurse immediately gets all weird and overly friendly and tells Shin that he should go ahead and call her little fruit, but Shin quickly cuts in and tells him that he should just stick to calling her apple and leave it at that. Shin then asks Chen whether he has had a chance to check out the news on his phone recently, but Chen is so completely broke at this point that he does not even own a smartphone to begin with. Apple then takes the opportunity to poke fun at Chen for walking around with a phone that looks like it belongs back in the 90s. Shin then tells him to just block out everything else going on around him and put all of his attention and energy into preparing for his upcoming match. She then hands him some clothes and tells him to make sure he takes good care of them. Shin goes on to explain that what she is handing over to him is the official garb of the Southern Style Fist Association, and that once he has it in his possession, he is officially and fully recognized as one of them. Apple then jumps in and adds that Sanjiang Shin is actually Shin's own father, and that from this point forward whenever Chen runs into anyone in this line of work, he should make sure to introduce himself as a disciple of the Southern Style Wing Chun master Sanjiang Shin. After all of that is settled, Chen heads out on his own, thinking to himself about how he does not even have nearly enough money to go out and buy himself a decent smartphone right now. While Chen is busy digging through his wallet and checking what little he has, a guy with a really unusual hairstyle accidentally walks right into him and quickly asks if he is doing alright. The guy then spots the bag that Chen has on him and it only takes him a second to figure out that Chen must be from the Southern Style Fist Association. The moment that clicks for him, the guy lights up with excitement and tells Chen that he has always dreamed of getting the chance to go up against a real Chinese martial artist, and that he himself happens to be pretty solid when it comes to boxing. Chen is quick to put the brakes on that idea though, pointing out that the rules they are expected to follow actually do not allow them to just go around picking fights with anyone they feel like challenging whenever they want. The guy then comes up with the idea that the two of them should just go ahead and become friends and have themselves a casual and friendly little spar, making the point that something as relaxed as that would not even come close to counting as a random fight between strangers. After that whole back and forth conversation wraps up, the guy ends up grabbing Chen and dragging him along with him to a pretty pricey adult shop, despite the fact that Chen makes it abundantly clear from the very start that he has absolutely zero interest in setting foot inside a place like that. Once they are actually inside, Chen gets all red-faced and flustered and tells the guy that the whole place is looking a little too exciting and overwhelming for him and that the two of them really have no business being in there at all, but the guy brushes off every single one of his protests and refuses to budge on the matter. Meanwhile, on a completely different side of things, Paolo is sitting there grilling his assistant and demanding to know more about the guy connected to the Black murder case, and his assistant goes ahead and informs him that the guy had taken it upon himself to go out and pick up a brand new mission completely on his own without breathing a single word of it to anyone else beforehand. The moment Paolo hears that, he absolutely loses his temper and makes no effort whatsoever to hold back his fury. 3 days later, Chen and his new friend are going at it hard together in training while Ling and the little girl watch on from the side, both of them genuinely surprised and amused by just how quickly the two of them managed to become such good friends in such a short amount of time. Ling is also really happy to see that the guy had even gone out of his way to buy Chen a brand new phone on top of everything else. During one of their training sessions, the guy tells Chen straight up that there is absolutely nothing he can do to beat him no matter how hard he tries, but the moment Chen throws a high Wing Chun style kick at him, the guy gets genuinely scared and quickly backs himself off and out of range. Chen then explains that the kick he just threw was actually pulled from a completely different style of martial art altogether, and that he had been thinking it might be a good way to fill in and cover some of the weaknesses that exist within the Wing Chun style, so he decided to just go ahead and give it a shot and see how it felt. Hearing that, the guy becomes even more nervous and unsure about facing Chen going forward, and Chen laughs it off and says that he is going to need to start looking for a brand new sparring partner pretty soon. Later on, Chen asks him why he never seems to train using his legs, and the guy, whose name is revealed to be Isaac, opens up and explains that he had been in an accident at some point and that he now has a robotic leg as a result of it. After that, Chen heads out and makes his way over to the gym where his friend greets him with the news that there is not a single grade C fighter left who is willing to step up and fight him anymore. Chen then takes a look at the fighting list and quickly realizes that there is still no name listed for his second match, and he knows deep down that there is absolutely no way the death camp is just going to sit back and let what he did to them slide without doing something about it. At the same time, two boys are busy talking amongst themselves about how Chen's opponent for the upcoming match has still not been decided or announced yet, but then Paolo suddenly appears out of nowhere and tells the both of them to shut their mouths right then and there. Paolo then turns to his assistant and asks him for a full update on how everything is currently sitting, and the guy reveals to him that he will be personally handling the situation involving the Black murder exactly the way they had originally planned it out. Paolo then lets a slow smile spread across his face and says that they are going to go ahead and keep just a little bit of the mystery wrapped up and save it for when the actual match rolls around, clearly enjoying the idea of keeping everyone in the dark about what is really coming. Later that night, the time for the match finally arrives and an absolutely incredible and overwhelming number of people have packed themselves into the stadium to watch. Chen's friend pulls him aside and tells him straight up that he should seriously consider forfeiting because he has got a really bad feeling about how this particular match is going to go. However, Chen shakes his head and tells him flat out that forfeiting is simply not something he is willing to do. Shin then steps in and tells him that he is going to be just fine, pointing out that life does not always have the decency to give people enough time to fully prepare for what is coming their way. After that, Chen makes his entrance into the stadium, and when the moment comes for his opponent to step out and be revealed, Chen is completely shocked to see that it is actually Isaac, whose real name turns out to be Douglas. The crowd is equally caught off guard and starts buzzing with confusion, wondering out loud who on earth Douglas even is, since none of them have ever heard that name before in their lives. Meanwhile, Tang also arrives at the stadium to watch the match from the VIP seatings. Xiaowan and Z also join them, and they never thought that he would like something like this. He tells them that everyone has a hobby, and just because his father don't like it doesn't mean that he don't. Tang then asks her if they have a little wager and says that the girls are going to marry whoever makes the right wager. Xiaowan picks Chen and the other girl picks Isaac, and with that the match gets underway with Chen throwing the first punch straight at Isaac, who manages to block it without breaking a sweat. Isaac tells Chen that he is going to need to get a whole lot more serious than that because he has already seen through every single one of his moves at this point. Isaac then winds up and launches a powerful roundhouse kick aimed directly at Chen's face. Chen quickly picks up on the fact that Isaac's fighting style is not built around his fists at all, and that he is moving even faster than he was before. After that exchange, Isaac closes the distance between them and suddenly leaps around to Chen's backside and connects with a sharp back kick. Chen then spins around instantly and fires a kick straight into Isaac's neck that catches him completely off guard and takes him by surprise. Isaac takes a significant amount of damage from the hit and admits that it was actually a pretty solid kick. Seeing that play out, the people watching in the crowd find themselves completely puzzled by Isaac's unusual fighting style and start wondering out loud what on earth kind of martial art he is using, since none of them have ever come across anything remotely like it before. On the other side of things, Shin is watching closely and thinks to herself that this kind of wild and unpredictable martial art that makes full use of both the feet and the arms at the same time can only be the Brazilian war dance. However, she is still not entirely convinced that it is Brazilian dance fighting and finds herself thinking that this is a really bad situation because they simply do not know nearly enough about him, and Chen is sitting at a massive disadvantage going into this. Chen then turns to Isaac and asks him straight up who he really is, and he comes clean and reveals that his real name is Douglas, and that he is an active member of the Black Murder Division over at the death camp. He also explains that the whole reason he had gotten close to Chen in the first place was so that he could find out everything there was to know about him and how he fights. He further adds that if he had not gone through all of that trouble beforehand, he never would have found out anything about his leg-based martial art style going into this. On top of all that, he makes it clear that now he is going to go ahead and beat him before Chen even has a chance to sit back and properly analyzes his fighting style. After that, Chen suddenly charges straight at him using the footwork of the Tan-style leg technique, which catches Douglas completely off guard and surprises him. While he is in the middle of beating Douglas down, Chen tells him that he is someone who never forgets kindness no matter how small it is, and that even though Douglas had only done him the tiniest little favor, that was more than enough for him to consider him a real friend, and that this is simply the kind of person he is and always will be. Chen then pulls out the double butterfly palm that he had used to finish off Iron Wolf and uses it to send Douglas crashing hard into the ground. Douglas slowly picks himself back up off the ground and tells Chen that it was really not very nice of him at all to go ahead and pull a move like that on him. Chen does not waste even a single second and immediately charges straight at him with a punch thrown forward, but Douglas sees it coming and dodges cleanly out of the way before reaching out and grabbing onto one of the ropes and using it to swing himself around with momentum. He then uses that momentum to launch himself directly at Tien and drives a sharp knee strike right into his face as he comes flying down. Douglas then wastes absolutely no time and charges right back at him again, making it abundantly clear through his actions that he is standing in that ring for one single reason and one reason only, and that is to walk away with the win no matter what it takes. He then keeps turning up the heat and continues to go after Tien relentlessly with attack after attack, leaving Tien in a really rough spot as he struggles harder and harder to keep his defenses together and stop himself from getting completely overwhelmed. Tien takes a brief moment to speak up and tells Douglas that winning is without a doubt one of the most important things a person can fight for when they are standing inside the ring, but that none of that is going to stop Douglas from feeling however he wants to feel toward him for what he did out there. He then answers back by landing a solid kick on Douglas. After that, both of them are running seriously low on energy and Tien can feel his legs starting to go completely numb, but at the same time he also picks up on the fact that something seems genuinely off about Douglas's body. Tien then activates his ability and carefully scans Douglas, noticing that there are two distinct weak points sitting somewhere on his body. The voice inside Tien's head then chimes in and tells him that this is only his best guess, but that Douglas's body appears to have been modified in some way. Douglas then charges at Tien once again and comes at him from above just like he usually does, and Gu quickly warns Tien to watch out for it. Gu steps in just in time and manages to block the incoming attack, which catches Douglas completely off guard and leaves him visibly surprised by what just happened. Tien then immediately seizes the moment and charges straight at him, launching an attack aimed directly at one of the weak points he had identified on Douglas's body. However, Douglas does not show even the slightest bit of effect from the hit and instead responds by shoving Tien back with every last bit of his full strength, sending him flying all the way across to the other side of the stadium with a single push. The moment the crowd sees that play out, they completely lose their minds and the entire place erupts with an energy that has everyone feeling absolutely pumped and thrilled that they made the decision to show up to this particular match today. One guy sitting in the crowd finds himself completely unable to process the fact that Tien has already managed to get this incredibly strong in such a short amount of time, and starts genuinely thinking to himself that Tien might actually have a real and legitimate shot at coming out of this whole thing with the win after all. Shin speaks up and says that she is not so sure about that, even though she has to admit that his growth has been nothing short of miraculous and that he has already gone ahead and shown everything he has got. She further points out that his physical body and overall physique are simply nowhere near on the same level as his opponents. Tien's friend gets pretty disheartened when he hears that and says that given just how tough and physically overwhelming his opponent really is, Tien might still end up on the losing side purely because of how exhausted and fatigued he is going to be, even if his skill level happens to be higher. Gu then steps in and fills Tien in on something important, letting him know that Douglas has most likely been practicing Yog specifically in order to find a way to overcome and work around his own weakness. Douglas charges straight at Tien and starts unloading punches on him, all while thinking to himself that Tien has already seen through every single one of his weak points by this stage. Tien does his best to defend himself but ends up breaking his wrist bone in the process of trying to hold off the assault. Tien then patiently waits for just the right moment to strike and goes after Douglas's chest with everything he has got and lands a hit. However, the attack does absolutely nothing to Douglas, and so Tien follows it up by driving his head straight into him with a head bump. Gu then speaks up and points out that all of the weak points on Douglas's body have now been dealt with, and on top of that Tien can no longer use his right arm properly either. Tien then tells himself that he needs to make a firm decision right now because he simply cannot afford to keep hesitating any longer. He also realizes that if he keeps things going the way they are right now, he is going to end up losing for certain, but that in order to have any real shot at finishing Douglas off, Gu is going to step in and help him predict his movements going forward. After that, Douglas comes at him with another attack, but Gu quickly feeds Tien the instructions he needs, telling him to take the incoming strike on his right arm and use the surge of adrenaline that comes from the pain to boost the power he has left in his other arm. Tien then manages to follow through and land some really heavy and damaging shots on Douglas. He thinks to himself that Douglas has woven yoga into his fighting style in a truly seamless and perfect way, along with his body modifications as well, and that if it had not been for Gu being there with him throughout all of this, he would have already lost a long time ago. On the other hand, Douglas finds himself thinking that Tien's ability to pick things up and adapt on the fly is way too impressive for his own good, because not only has Tien managed to hide his true fighting style this whole time, but he has also kept a trump card tucked away, and even managed to land a psychological blow on him along the way. Despite all of that, not only has Tien been unable to finish him off, but he has somehow even managed to sniff out the weak points on his body as well. The two of them then keep going at each other and continue trading kicks back and forth, but Chen ends up coming out of the exchange much worse off than Douglas since Douglas's legs are essentially built like solid steel. Douglas then unloads a punch on Chen so devastating and powerful that it sends him stumbling and getting pushed back a significant distance. The moment the crowd sees that happen, everyone watching completely freaks out and the tension in the place skyrockets. Shin then gets a call from Apple, who tells her that she has managed to dig up some really useful information on Chen's opponent. However, Shin tells her that there is really no point in any of that at this stage since Chen is pretty much almost completely done for out there at this point. Apple then drops the surprising news that he is actually not going to be losing this fight after all, explaining that she had gone through all the trouble of hacking her way straight into the death camp's secret files just to find this out, and so Shin immediately tells her to go ahead and send over every last bit of the details right away. Douglas then starts slowly making his way toward Chen, telling him along the way that he would not have had to go through all of this unnecessary trouble if he had just gone ahead and finished him off much earlier when he had the clear chance to do it. However, Chen's vision is starting to go seriously blurry and his grip on things around him is beginning to slip, but Gu urgently speaks up inside his head and tells him that he absolutely needs to move right now or he is going to end up losing everything. Right at that critical moment, Douglas suddenly launches himself high up into the air and comes flying down at Chen, preparing to unleash his most powerful and devastating special technique on him with everything he has got left. Meanwhile, the entire crowd starts screaming at Chen to just go ahead and give up already if he cannot keep going, throwing all kinds of names at him including coward and a whole lot of other things besides that. Paolo is sitting there watching and thinks to himself that surrendering right now would actually be the smart play for Chen, and that he will at least get to walk away with his life intact if he does, but that there is absolutely nothing he can do to save what is left of his reputation after all of this. However, Paolo is caught completely off guard when he suddenly sees Chen leap up onto the rope. Paolo immediately recognizes that this is not a forfeit at all and that it is actually the opening move of some kind of leg-based technique that Chen is setting up. Chen meanwhile is thinking to himself that his entire body is suddenly flooding with a rush of incredible strength, but Gu quickly cuts in and tells him to stop and get his head straight first if he actually wants to come out of this with a win. Chen then makes up his mind to go ahead and borrow the technique he had seen Song Shan use and launches himself straight at Douglas. He then comes crashing down directly onto Douglas's head, driving him hard into the ground with the full force of the move. Douglas then slowly and painfully drags himself back up off the ground and declares through gritted teeth that he still has not lost yet. The moment Douglas manages to get back on his feet, everyone watching starts murmuring amongst themselves in complete disbelief, wondering out loud whether this guy is literally made out of steel since he is somehow still standing and looking relatively fine after taking a hit like that. Dulges then charges towards Chen and his friend shouts at him to dodge, but Shin thinks that he might have a chance to win this way. She quotes the famous slogan that stillness beats chaos and that Chen is exhausted and hurt right now, so if he tried any extreme movements, he might end up hurting himself. On the other hand, Chen is still having a really tough time holding his own against her and ends up breaking yet another one of his bones in the process. Gu then speaks up and urges him to pour every single last drop of strength he has remaining into this one strike and make it count. Chen then launches himself at Douglas and attacks with every bit of strength he can possibly muster, but at the very last second he pulls back and holds himself from going all the way through with it. Douglas is completely caught off guard by this and finds himself thinking that in that one critical moment, Chen had deliberately held back what would have without a doubt been a killing blow. Douglas then makes his way over to the announcer and goes ahead and surrenders right then and there, which sends a wave of complete and total shock through absolutely everyone who is present and watching the whole thing play out. However, the crowd is still left feeling pretty unsatisfied and genuinely confused about the whole situation, with a good number of them grumbling out loud that this is not even remotely entertaining or exciting anymore and that they feel cheated out of a proper finish. Meanwhile, Xiaowan turns to Tang and wastes no time reminding him that he had better make sure to follow through and propose to her, seeing as she had gone ahead and won their bet completely fair and square and fully intends to collect on it. Back at the ring, Chen turns to Douglas and tells him straight up that if the two of them had kept going and pushed things all the way to the end, he would have come out on top without much trouble, but Douglas fires right back and tells him that if Chen had actually gone ahead and finished things the way he could have, it would have been an enormous slight against his honor as a fighter and an even greater and more personal insult to everything he stands for. Once all of that is finally settled and out of the way, Shin steps in without wasting any more time and takes Chen over to the medical room so that he can get his injuries looked at and properly treated, and once he is comfortably settled in, she heads off to go and confront Paolo directly about everything that has been going on. The next day, Chen finally manages to wake up and immediately asks Kuriko whether anything had happened while he was out. Kuriko tells him that there is both some bad news and some good news to get through, explaining that the bad news is that his sister has already found out all about his injuries and is currently throwing an absolutely massive fit over it. As for the good news, Shin cuts in and tells Apple to go ahead and share that part herself, but then immediately follows it up by saying that from this point on there is really only bad news and even worse news waiting for them, and asks Chin whether he actually wants to go ahead and hear it. Chin tells her straight up that he is strong enough to handle whatever it is they have to tell him. Apple then goes ahead and lays out all of the information she had managed to gather on Douglas. It turns out that Douglas's real name is completely unknown, and that he goes by code number 24 within the Black Murder Group. He was born and raised in a desperately poor village somewhere in Africa where the situation on the ground was so terrible that people would get into brutal and violent fights with each other every single day just to scrape together enough food to survive, and Douglas had been the strongest child in the entire village from a very young age. Before long, his enormous potential was stumbled upon by the death camp completely by accident, and they extended an invitation to him to come and join their ranks, but only on the condition that they would make sure his family back home was taken care of and kept safe. Shin explains that the death camp has a covert arm that operates in the shadows and specializes specifically in stepping in and handling matches that are too difficult or complicated for anyone else to deal with. Apple then jumps in and adds that the even scarier part of all of this is the fact that it is widely said that the bodies of the people in this division actually go through physical modifications. She also reveals that she had even managed to find out that they have somehow been drawing on a type of energy that does not belong to this world at all. Hearing all of that, everyone in the room gets completely taken aback and starts wondering out loud whether any of this could possibly have something to do with Gu and what he represents. On the other hand, Douglas makes his way back to the death camp where the head of the camp tells him that he did a solid job out there and that as a result he is going to go ahead and send some money over to his family this time around. The very next day, Douglas opens up to the old men around him and tells them that he wishes more than anything that he could get to see his home village just one more time, and the guy sitting nearby asks him why he does not simply go ahead and head back home. Douglas tells him that he simply cannot show up there looking the way his body currently does. After that conversation, Douglas goes ahead and gets his hand repaired and fixed up using technology, and he has no choice but to rely on it completely because at this point it is simply far too late to do anything else about it. In a flashback, Douglas is shown continuing his training over at the gym with his brand new arms that have been built using even more advanced and impressive technology than before. The old men walk into the gym and ask him how everything feels, and he tells them that this new body of his is actually pretty solid and that he can even control and adjust the power behind each of his strikes simply by changing the way the breath flows through his body. Douglas also opens up and says that he is fully aware that he does not have a whole lot of time left to live at this point. He goes on to say that as someone who has spent his whole life as a killer, he has always been extremely in tune with every little thing happening inside his own body. He also adds that ever since the surgery was done, something has felt off about the whole thing, with the side effects that come from trying to regulate the flow of breath through his body turning out to be far worse than anyone had anticipated. The old geezer then steps forward and tells him that it is entirely his fault and apologizes to him sincerely for what has happened, going on to explain that even though the surgery had managed to get Douglas back on his feet and fighting again, the material that the prosthetics are made from is slowly but surely having a deadly and damaging side effect on his heart that nobody had been able to foresee at the time. To his surprise, the old man reveals that he has 5 years left to live at his best. Hearing that, Douglas gets surprised for a second but then starts smiling, saying to others that they should give him as many missions as they can, because he need to earn so much money. When he leaves, the old man's assistant asks him if they really need to keep Douglas around. The old man replies that even if he is a failed product, they should use him if he can still be used. In the following years, Douglas took missions one after another and no one knows how much money Douglas actually made. It turns out, Douglas had a dream and he wanted to see his family happy. One day, Douglas received a call from the old man who gives him a final mission to fight Chen. Douglas tells them that he will go ahead and complete the mission and then make his way back home once it is all done. Back in the present, Chen sits there and comes to the realization that no matter how that match had ended up going, Douglas would have been killed either way regardless of the outcome. Shin then lets Chen know that Douglas had also left behind a letter for him that they had found sitting on the desk that very morning. After that, Chen sits down and reads through the letter, which lays out everything Douglas had been feeling and tells Chen straight up that he needs to use every bit of his time from here on out to get stronger no matter what it takes. Chen then turns to Gu and points out that the whole reason Douglas did all of this was to keep him safe and to send him a clear warning that he is in very real danger. Gu responds by telling Chen that he seriously needs to get better as soon as possible because he had pushed way too hard and exerted far too much of his strength on Chen's behalf during the fight. On the other side of things, Paolo tracks down Douglas and confronts him directly for failing to finish Chen off when he had the chance. Douglas tells him plainly that he showed Chen the respect that he deserved as a fellow fighter, and that is all there is to it. Paolo then turns around and walks out of the room without another word, quietly telling his assistant on the way out to go ahead and get Plan B into motion. Paolo's assistant walks up and informs him that Plan B is set to kick off tonight, and Paolo tells him to make sure not to go overboard with it since right now is simply not the right time to go burning bridges with the Southern-style Fist Association. On a completely different side of things, Douglas is still hanging there restrained by a set of heavy chains while the guys standing around him tell him to stop wasting whatever energy he has left since these particular chains have been specially designed and built for the sole purpose of holding someone like him in place. Douglas sits there thinking to himself that they are clearly getting rid of him now that he has served his purpose and outlived his usefulness to them, which he supposes is just the kind of fate that someone like him, a killer, should have always expected to meet. He then realizes that there is still something very important that he needs to take care of before he dies. Without any further hesitation, Douglas suddenly snaps the chains clean off in an instant and slams one of the guys standing nearby straight into the ground using a mysterious and unexpected move that none of them saw coming. Another guy then pulls out a gun and starts firing bullets directly at Douglas, but Douglas manages to block every single one of them using his steel arms and then crushes the pistol completely with nothing but his raw strength. After finishing off the guards, Douglas grabs some cash and the company card he needs and gets himself ready to clear out of the area as fast as possible. The moment he steps outside, however, he is met with a whole group of death camp guards who already have their weapons trained and aimed directly at him. The guards open fire and send a hail of bullets straight at Douglas, but he dodges every single one of them in an instant and immediately activates his special ability called Battle Dance Heat Rush, using it to rapidly push the temperature of the entire surrounding area sky high. The guards are left completely baffled and start looking around in confusion, wondering why it has suddenly gotten so unbearably hot and questioning whether it is the intense friction being generated between Douglas's strikes and the air around him that is causing all of this heat to build up so quickly. Douglas then calmly walks right past them and tells them that they should find a way to cool themselves down as fast as they possibly can, because if they do not, the overwhelming heat building up all around them is going to cause their blood vessels to burst from the inside. Just moments after Douglas warns them, the guards' necks suddenly burst open, and blood comes pouring out as they collapse and drop dead right there on the spot. When Douglas finally makes it outside and steps out into the open air, he tilts his head up and takes in the sight of the moon hanging up in the night sky, and finds himself thinking that it looks especially beautiful tonight, which in his mind can only mean that it is shaping up to be a pretty solid night for doing what he does best, which is killing people. Meanwhile, on a completely different side of things, a strange and completely unfamiliar woman has quietly shown up and is lurking around suspiciously right outside the building where Chen is currently staying and resting up. The moment Douglas becomes aware of the situation, he pushes every last bit of himself to move as fast as he possibly can and get there in time, knowing that if he does not reach Chen quickly enough, that woman is going to get the chance she needs to do something seriously harmful. Chen is sitting down having dinner with his friend and asks him how Ling has been doing. His friend tells him that she is still furious at him and flat out refuses to see him until he has gotten himself properly better. Hearing that, Gu jumps in and gets all fired up, asking Chen whether she is supposed to be his mother or his wife, and Chen clarifies that she is his sister. Chen then turns to his friend and sincerely thanks him for stepping up and taking care of her, acknowledging that he knows his friend has his own family and his own things to worry about on top of all of this. On a completely different side of things, Douglas makes his way over and approaches that strange woman, but instead of saying a single word to him, she immediately hurls a knife straight in Chen's direction without any hesitation. Douglas reacts in an instant and kicks the knife out of the air just in time, though he barely manages to pull himself back onto the building as he comes dangerously close to losing his footing and falling right off the edge. Douglas then tells her that normally in a situation like this the first thing someone would do is ask him what he is doing there, but the girl shoots back and tells him that they are all killers in this line of work and that what he chooses to get himself involved in is absolutely none of her business. The girl then demands to know why he went ahead and betrayed them, and Douglas replies that he did not betray anyone. She also says that he simply knows his own body better than anyone else does and wanted to make sure he protected something important before his time ran out. The moment he brings up the fact that Paolo had gone and disrespected his principles, the girl immediately launches herself at him and attacks without any warning. Douglas manages to read her kick just in time and dodges out of the way before reaching out and grabbing her leg and slamming her hard down onto the ground. He then launches himself up into the air and comes crashing down at her with his full force behind the attack, but she reacts quickly enough to roll out of the way and dodge it before springing right back up and charging straight at him using her legs. She then gets him into a choke hold on the ground and completely locks him down in a position that he has absolutely no way of getting out of easily, which Douglas realizes. Douglas finds himself getting more and more frustrated by the second as he realizes that he simply cannot find a way to turn things around from the position he is stuck in, and that this very well might be the end of the road for him right here. Somehow though, Douglas digs deep and manages to land a solid punch right in her face that catches her off guard. She then looks at him and asks whether that move just now was the African battle dance, but Douglas simply tells her that there is always going to be some way for a person to save their own life when they are pushed far enough into a corner. Hearing that, the girl's expression shifts into pure fury and she pulls off her gloves and throws them aside, telling him that she is going to kill him right now. Seeing that, Douglas gets genuinely nervous and realizes that he simply cannot come out on top against her if she decides to go ahead and use her full potential in this fight. He then charges straight at her and throws a punch, but the girl effortlessly dodges it by leaping right behind him and jumping over him in a way that makes it look like she is about to hop on his back for a piggyback ride. Douglas does not waste even a single moment after that and immediately smashes her hard down onto the ground. After that, the girl casually takes off her shoes and shows off her bare feet, and Douglas cannot help but mention that if her body was not poisonous, fighting someone as beautiful as her would actually be quite a pleasure. The girl then launches herself at him and starts throwing a rapid series of punches his way, and Douglas does everything he possibly can to keep dodging out of the way and avoid taking any clean hits. During the back and forth of their duel, the girl notices that his wounds from before have clearly not healed up at all yet, but Douglas tells her bluntly to mind her own business and stay out of it. He then winds up and tries to land a punch on her, but the girl simply reaches out and grabs both of his arms and swings him clean up into the air, telling him with complete confidence that he is absolutely going to die right here at her hands tonight. Douglas's vision then starts going seriously blurry around the edges, and the girl takes the opportunity to mock him about it, telling him that those metal arms of his are not going to be nearly enough to block what she is about to do to him. Douglas gets furious and tries a special ability that is the mixture of his battle dance and wild wind. However, the girl thinks that it's not effective against her and charges at him. Using her scorpion sting ability, she stabs Douglas right in the heart and kicks him in the face. After dealing with him, she starts to walk away, but Douglas still doesn't give up and tells her to stop. Upon seeing that, the girl is shocked that he is still alive after being inflicted with her poison. Douglas then tells her that the poison wasn't deep enough for him to die yet. After that, he charges at her with a kick, but the girl says that he should just roll over and wait for his death. Douglas says that he knows the reason she is here and he also figured out that the head wants to frame him for Chen's murder. The girl then tells him straight up that whatever he is trying to do right now is completely and utterly pointless and a total waste of his time. Douglas fires back and says that Chen genuinely respects him and treats him like a real true friend, and that all he wants to do is find a way to repay that faith that Chen has placed in him before it is all over. The girl then shoves him down onto the ground and positions herself right on top of him, but instead of finishing him off in some brutal and cruel way, she simply leans down and kisses him. At that moment, Chen and his friend are making their way up toward the rooftop together. Chen's friend mentions that he has already gone ahead and called the police and then asks Chen how he even knew that something had gone wrong up here in the first place. It turns out that it was Gu who had tipped Chen off about the whole situation, having sensed that the energy being produced by the battle happening on the rooftop was incredibly powerful and impossible to ignore. When the two of them finally make it up to the rooftop, they find Douglas lying there on the ground in a really bad state. Douglas then reaches out and hands Chen a special entry card along with some cash as a farewell gift, making it clear that he wants Chen to take it and actually put it to good use. Douglas then draws one final breath and passes away right there on the spot, leaving Chen standing over him in silence. The very next day, the same girl who had killed Douglas is sitting right there in Paolo's office while Paolo is completely losing it at some employee on the other end of a phone call. Paolo is furious at the person because the black killer fighters keep quitting on them one after another without any warning. Just then, a guy walks in and lets Paolo know that they managed to receive Douglas's body without causing any kind of scene or commotion whatsoever. It then becomes clear that the person Paolo has been yelling at on the phone is actually the old man from the death camp, who tells Paolo to calm himself down and not get so worked up. He further explains that they have no idea what exactly happened to Douglas, but also mentioning that this is simply the way BG operates and that she always does things according to whatever mood she happens to be in at the time. Before getting up and heading out of the room, BG casually turns to Paolo and tells him to go ahead and get a room ready for her since she is going to be sticking around for the time being. Meanwhile, over at Hai Chen's estate on his private island, Zi pays a visit to her grandfather to check in on how his health is holding up, and he tells her honestly that his legs have gotten to a point where they simply cannot be healed anymore no matter what anyone tries to do about it. Zi pushes back and tells her grandfather that it simply cannot be true that nothing can be done, pointing out that medical technology has advanced so far at this point that there absolutely has to be some kind of way to fix his legs if they just look hard enough for it. Zi then brings up the fact that she had recently gone along with one of her classmates to watch a fight over at the Tien Wu fighting hall, but her grandfather immediately questions what could possibly be enjoyable or worthwhile about watching people fight each other. Zi explains that those kinds of open competitions are really nothing more than pure entertainment put on for the audience with the main goal of making money, and that the fighting skills on display there are just surface-level external techniques that would be of absolutely no use or benefit to him and his condition. Zi then mentions that during the match she watched, someone had actually gone ahead and used Qigong right there in the middle of the fight, which was a completely different and unexpected thing to witness. On a completely different side of things, Chen is getting scolded by Shin like usual and she takes the time to inform him that Douglas's body has already been recovered and taken back by the death camp. Once she finishes up and leaves the room, Gu speaks up and asks Chen whether he is sitting there thinking about going after someone for revenge, telling him plainly that going as far as killing someone is simply way too much for him to be taking on right now. Gu then says that if Douglas was not prepared to die he wouldn't have been a killer. Furthermore, he says that there will always be someone trying to kill him and he'll surely die. At that moment, Chen thinks that he has to become stronger no matter what, and if he's stronger, he won't need to be afraid of anyone trying to kill him. Just then, Chen's friend shows up and informs him that his sister Ling is hospitalized. Later at the hospital, Chen sits there blaming himself for not being around for his sister during such a critical and important time when she needed him most. The doctor then walks in and lets Chen know that Ling's condition has at least stabilized for the time being, but that they have been completely unable to figure out what is actually causing her illness in the first place. He then drops the truly shocking news that at the rate things are currently going, she might not even make it through the week. Chen then steps into the room to go and be with his sister, but the small girl from before suddenly appears looking visibly worried and distressed about Ling's condition. The girl then turns to Chen and tells him to go ahead and kill her, explaining that she genuinely believes that Ling must have gotten sick because of her own influence on her, since she had been drawing away her yang qi this whole time and that is what caused her to fall ill in the first place. Hearing all of that, Chen is completely taken aback and steps back out of the room, telling them that he needs some time to think and figure something out. Chen then gets on the phone and calls Shin, asking her whether the person she had mentioned the last time they spoke could come and take a look at his sister right now, but Shin tells him that the person is not even back in the country yet. Chen's friend does his best to try and lift his spirits and reassure him that Ling is going to pull through and be just fine, but Chen simply walks away from him because he needs some time completely alone with his thoughts. Right at that moment, Gu speaks up inside his head and tells Chen that he actually has a way to save his sister. Once he makes it back home, Gu brings up the white cat from before and tells Chen that she might actually be able to help him out with what he needs. Gu goes on to explain that he does not know all that much about the cat itself, but that the charms she carries on her will be able to help him in a meaningful way. He explains that the most important part of any charm is the aura that is embedded within it, and that the average everyday person cannot even begin to sense that kind of thing on their own. Gu further tells him that how well things go is also going to come down to his own natural talent, pointing out that during the battle they had just been through, Chen had already managed to tap into and use qi without even fully realizing it, and that this alone is solid proof that he genuinely has the talent needed to pull this off. Afterward, Chen wastes no time and quickly goes ahead and tries to draw the same charm out on a piece of paper, but the moment he finishes it the paper suddenly catches fire right in his hands. He gets pretty worried about what just happened, and Gu tells him that he had drawn it way too hastily and ended up releasing all of his fire qi into it at once without any control. Chen tries his hand at it a second time but it fails again just like before, and his confidence starts to take a serious hit as a result. Chen then ends up spending his entire night going through the same process over and over again, but no matter how many times he tries he still cannot get it right. Gu looks at his latest attempt and tells him that there is simply far too little qi being pushed into the charm and that at best what he is producing is a half-finished product that is not going to be anywhere near strong enough to help his sister the way he needs it to. The next day, Chen makes his way over to the Tien Wu fighting hall where the guards stationed at the entrance immediately move to block him, telling him straight up that this is not a place where a C-ranked fighter like him can just walk in and out of whenever he feels like it. Chen tells them that he needs to speak with Paolo directly, but the guards are not budging and keep trying to stop him from going any further. Eventually Chen has had enough and barges his way straight into the office, where he is immediately caught off guard to find BG lounging around on the sofa, and he gets all shy the moment he sees her sitting there. Tien then turns his attention to Paolo and tells him flat out that he wants a match arranged for him, and Paolo tells him that something is already being put together since he still has 5 matches left to fight in for Crazy Dog. However, Tien pushes further and tells him that he specifically wants another match set up within this very week, to which Paolo shoots back and questions whether he is seriously thinking about getting back in the ring already given the state his injuries are currently in. Tien then makes it very clear that what he needs is a match where he can walk away with $150,000, and the moment he says that, Paolo realizes that what Tien is really after right now is a serious amount of money. Paolo then tells him that he will go ahead and get a match sorted out for him 3 days from now, but not before warning him that if he ends up dying in that ring, he had better not come back, saying that nobody reminded him it was coming. Later, Tien goes to the office and tells the little girl that he has to kill her because he don't have a choice and promises that he will never forget her. Just then, Tien receives a call from Shin, who informs him that she already contacted the doctor and priest who can cure his sister and they should arrive within the week. Hearing that, Tien gets genuinely excited about the possibility, but Shin also drops the information that they are going to want $150,000 in order to make it happen. After that, Tien sits down and starts doing the math in his head, figuring out that he had earned $100,000 from his last fight and that after taking away everything that had been spent on treatment, he still has around $50,000 left over to work with. Tien's injury then suddenly heals itself on its own, and he realizes it is because of the charm he had been carrying around in his pocket this whole time. Gu then speaks up and asks Tien what exactly he is planning to do about all of this and what happens if things do not go his way and he ends up losing. Tien thinks it through and concludes that what he needs more than anything right now is money, and that in order to get rid of him once and for all, Paolo is almost certainly going to go ahead and set up a match worth well over $150,000 for him to fight in. He then starts making his way toward the pharmacy, thinking to himself that he needs to take that $50,000 and put it toward buying as many tonics as he possibly can in order to push his strength and power up as much as possible before the fight. When he arrives at the pharmacy, Tien unexpectedly runs into Tang, who takes the moment to properly introduce himself and tells Tien that he has actually been keeping a close eye on him and observing him for quite a long time now. After that, the two of them leave the pharmacy together and Tien asks Tang whether the reason he has been observing him all this time is because he has a genuine interest in his fights. Tang tells him that fighters who show the kind of potential that Tien has always make him want to get back in and try it out himself as well. Tien then mentions that he is going to need to start finding ways to bring in more money, and Tang asks him why, so Tien explains that his sister's life is currently on the line. He also tells him that he needs to win a fight as soon as he possibly can in order to earn enough money to cover the cost of her treatment. Hearing all of that, Tang becomes even more genuinely interested in Tien than he already was and tells him that he can help him out since he has been watching him long enough to feel confident that he is someone truly worthy of his assistance. Tang then brings Tien over to his own fighting hall and tells him that he wants to have him practice there with him. Once they are inside what appears to be a pretty normal and unremarkable looking fighting hall on the surface, Tang takes Tien down to a hidden underground area where an ugly and strange-looking plant is being kept and stored away as though it were some kind of precious treasure. Tang explains to him that it is actually a plant that originates from another world entirely, known as the blood-stained fleece flower root, and that it only begins to move around when it comes into contact with light. He also mentions that if he can absorb it as nutrients he can increase Shi power a lot. Furthermore, Tang explains that there used to be 2 of these plants here, one big and one small. He mentions that he went ahead and ate the smaller one the previous year, and that ever since then the bigger one has been getting more and more aggressive and irritable with each passing day. He also warns Tien that it is dangerous enough at this point to genuinely cost him his life, and that he should really sit down and think carefully and calmly about whether he actually wants to go through with this. Tien tells him straight up that trying it out is the only real chance he has, because if he does not do something about it then his sister is going to die regardless. Right at that moment, the plant suddenly breaks free from the glass box it had been kept inside, and Tang takes that as his cue to get up and leave the room entirely, leaving Tien completely alone to deal with the whole situation by himself. Tien tries to go at the plant with a punch, but it immediately latches onto him and starts drawing blood right out of his body, and Gu quickly explains to him that this particular plant feeds on and absorbs the blood of animals as its source of nutrients. Tien then takes off running after the plant and tries his best to grab hold of it and get it under control, but it uses some kind of special ability of its own to break free from his grip every single time. Meanwhile, back over in Paolo's area, a group of guards are standing around talking amongst themselves about Tien and casually discussing how they are going to go about killing him. BG suddenly appears out of absolutely nowhere and kills every single one of them herself, telling them coldly that Chen belongs to her. How long do you think it will take for Chen to master the charm and save his sister before it's too late? Comment, Tien Wu, if you'd like a part 2 of this series. Make sure to like and subscribe the channel for more sports manhwa recaps.